Welcome to Coffee Break. Thoughtful conversations for a busy world. Let's begin.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
And I want you to be honest, because I think we've all been there. How many self-help books are currently sitting on your nightstand, maybe halfway read?
Is this a personal attack? Because I feel pretty seen right out of the gate here.
No, seriously. Think about it. We are living in the absolute golden age of optimization, right? I mean, we have apps for meditation that ding at us to be mindful. We have the gratitude journals, the ones with the nice leather covers.
Oh, yeah?
We have podcasts, frankly, like this one, telling us how to hack our brains, how to optimize our sleep, revolutionize our workflows. And we do the work. We genuinely try to change.
We do. We really do.
We decide, okay, this is the week. This is the week I stop being anxious, or this is the month I finally get productive and stop procrastinating.
It's that classic new year, new me energy, but, it's a random Tuesday in October.
Exactly. And you build this fortress of willpower. You feel invincible on Sunday night. You've meal prepped. You've written down your affirmations. And then Monday wording hits. You walk into the office, or you log onto that Zoom call, or maybe you just walk into your parents' house for dinner. And within, 10 minutes?
10 minutes if you're lucky. I mean, some of the data suggests it's closer to 30 seconds.
Right. Within 30 seconds, that whole fortress it crumbles. You snap at a colleague. You shrink back into that insecurity you swore you had left behind. You find yourself doom scrolling instead of working on that big project.
And the feeling that comes after isn't just frustration. It's deeper than that.
It's shame. It's this deep sinking thought of, I did the work. I read the book. I listened to the dump dive. Why is my brain broken?
That is the universal struggle right there. Why isn't it sticking?
And we almost always have a very specific and very wrong answer for ourselves. We tell ourselves, I'm weak. Or maybe I just don't want it enough. We see it as a character flaw. We internalize the failure completely. We just think we need more discipline, more grit.
Right. But today, we are doing a deep dive into a set of materials that suggests something completely different. We're looking at a source called The Architecture of Healing, and we're specifically pulling from a really provocative lecture in QofeBreak 047. And the source makes a claim that is honestly, it's a relief, but it's also a little scary.
It's the scary part that really interested me when I was reading through this, because the source is basically saying, your willpower is likely fine. Your mindset is probably working just fine. But you are fighting a losing battle because of where you are standing.
The core premise is this. You can't heal in the same environment that hurt you. And the source is arguing this isn't just some poetic saying you'd put on Instagram. This is biological. It's about how our nervous system, our very biology, maps safety, danger, and habit to physical space.
So, if I'm hearing this right, we're trying to run a major software update, changing our mindset. But we're trying to run it on hardware that is physically broken, or at least incompatible.
Or, to use the source's analogy, which I found incredibly powerful, you're trying to heal a burn on your hand. You're applying the ointment. You're bandaging it up. You're taking the pain meds. You're doing all the right things.
Right.
But you haven't actually taken your hand out of the fire yet. You're just applying ointment while the flame is still actively touching your skin.
Oof. That's visceral. But here's my worry, and I think you listening are probably thinking this too right now. Is this deep dive just going to tell us to quit our jobs, leave our families, and move to a cabin in the woods?
Right. The blow it all up approach.
Because I have a mortgage, I have kids, I can't just leave the environment every single time I get stressed out. That doesn't feel realistic.
And that is the crucial distinction we are going to make today. The source is very, very clear on this. We are not talking about being an arsonist and burning your life down. We are talking about being an architect.
Architect, not arsonist. I like that.
It's about finding the specific friction points in your environment that are silently neutralizing all your hard-earned willpower and then making realistic structural changes.
Okay, so the mission for this deep dive is to really figure out why our willpower seems to fail against our environment, why distance is sometimes the only variable that actually matters, and how to do this without blowing up our lives.
Exactly.
All right, let's unpack this. I think we need to start with section 1, the limits of mindset, because I have to play devil's advocate for a second. We've spent years, decades even, telling people it's all in your head.
Oh yeah, that's the dominant narrative.
Stoicism, cognitive behavioral therapy, meditation, it's all about how you react to the world. You can't control the event, only your reaction. Is the source saying that's all wrong?
Not wrong, no.
Yeah.
Just dangerously incomplete. The source argues that we have become hyper-individualistic about healing. We think we are these sealed units, like, I'm a fortress, and nothing outside should be able to affect my inner peace.
Right. If I'm stressed at my job, it's not because the workplace is fundamentally toxic. It's because I need to be more resilient.
Precisely. If I just meditate for 20 minutes instead of 10, my boss screaming at me won't matter. We treat personal growth like it's this purely internal intellectual exercise. But biologically, we are permeable. We are constantly, and I mean constantly, absorbing cues from our surroundings to determine how we should act.
Okay, so you're saying we're more like sponges than fortresses.
Exactly. Think about the concept of context-dependent memory. This is a huge part of the research that backs up this whole idea.
Okay, break that down for us. What is context-dependent memory?
So there's this classic study, and the source alludes to this very mechanism, where a group of researchers took a bunch of divers. They had them learn a list of words while they were fully underwater, wearing all their scuba gear.
Okay, a very specific setting.
A very specific context. Then they tested their recall. They tested half the group while they were still underwater, and the other half was tested back on dry land. The group that was tested underwater, in the exact same environment where they learned the words, remembered significantly more.
Wow.
The group that was tested on land, they forgot a huge chunk of the information. It just vanished from their brains.
Because the context, the water, the gear, the feeling of pressure, it was all part of the memory itself.
Exactly. The environment was the hook that the brain used to pull the information out. Now let's apply that to your emotional habits. Let's apply that to what the source calls your old self. If you learn to be defensive and anxious and cynical in a specific office, surrounded by specific people under those specific buzzing fluorescent lights,
then walking into that office doesn't just remind me of work. It's not a memory. It literally hooks that entire personality out of me.
it retrieves the old version of you. It's an automatic biological retrieval process. You can sit in your car and chant affirmations for 20 minutes. I am calm. I am collaborative. I am a leader. But the moment you cross that threshold, your environment screams, danger, be defensive. And your brain, your nervous system, obeys the environment, not the affirmation.
That's honestly terrifying. It makes free will feel a bit like an illusion in those moments.
In high-stress or highly cued environments, it kind of is. The source uses this term, the feedback loop. Your environment cues a behavior, you perform the behavior, and then the environment reinforces it. It's a closed circuit. If you try to change the behavior without changing the environmental cue, you are fighting your own biology every single second of the day.
Which explains the exhaustion. I think that's the part that resonates most with me and probably with a lot of people listening. It's not just that I fail to change, it's that the very act of trying to change while staying in the same place makes me so incredibly tired.
Right. That's why you come home feeling so drained. You aren't just tired from the tasks you did at work. You're tired from the immense cognitive load of actively repressing a triggered response for 8 hours straight. It's like you're holding a beach ball underwater all day.
And the second you lose focus, it shoots up to the surface.
And you snap at someone, or you eat the cookie you said you wouldn't. The source uses another analogy, which I think is just as powerful. It says you're trying to grow a tropical fern in the cracked earth of a desert.
Okay.
You can play Mozart to the fern. You can tell the fern it's a strong, independent plant. You can even hire a life coach for the fern. But if the soil is bone dry and the sun is scorching hot, the fern is going to die. Not because the fern is weak, but because the context forbids its growth.
Context forbids growth. That is a heavy phrase. It really shifts the blame, doesn't it? It stops being, I'm a failure, and it starts being, I'm in the wrong climate.
And that shift in perspective is the first step to actual healing. You have to stop analyzing the seed and start analyzing the soil.
So let's analyze the soil. The source breaks this soil down into a trinity of reinforcement. It says it's people, places, and routines. And I want to go deep on these because I think this is where you, listening, can really start to diagnose your own life.
Yes. These are the three main pillars that hold the old version of you in place.
Let's start with places, because we tend to think of places as just neutral backdrops, like my office is just a room with a desk, my bedroom is just a room with a bed. But the source argues that places hold emotional memory.
It is never just four walls and a ceiling. The source talks about how physical objects and spaces become encoded with deep emotional significance. Let's talk about something called the doorway effect. Have you ever walked into a room to get something, and the moment you cross the threshold, you completely forget what you came for?
All the time. I usually just stand there looking confused, checking my pockets, and then walk back out.
That's your brain performing what's called an event boundary reset. When you walk through a doorway, your brain dumps the short-term memory from the previous room to prepare for the new context. It treats room A and room B as completely different files on a computer. It's an efficiency mechanism.
Okay, so the room literally dictates which file my brain has open at any given moment.
Precisely. Now imagine you spent the last 3 years in your home office feeling trapped, burnt out, and deeply resentful. Maybe it was during the pandemic, maybe it was just a bad job. You felt that way for thousands of hours in that specific room.
I think a lot of our listeners are nodding their heads right now. The dreaded Zoom room.
Your brain has filed home office under the category threat misery. So the moment you walk in, before you even turn on your computer, your brain opens the misery file. It automatically adjusts your breathing, your heart rate, and your cortisol levels to match the room. It prepares you for the threat that it knows is there based on past data.
So if I try to sit in that same chair and do creative, joyful writing for my new hobby, or if I'm trying to start a new business from that very same desk,
You are fighting the file. The room is shouting, "Be stressed," while you are whispering to yourself, "Be creative." The room and its sensory inputs usually wins. The smell of the room, the specific angle of the light from the window, the texture of the chair you're sitting on, they are all triggers.
we usually use that word triggers for big T trauma. But you're saying it applies to just our everyday habits and moods.
Absolutely. A trigger is just a cue that initiates a pre-programmed pattern, and places are massive immersive triggers. This explains why going to a coffee shop feels so different for people who are trying to get work done. It's not just about the caffeine.
It's the absence of all the stress cues from home.
Correct. A coffee shop is a neutral context. Or maybe it's even a productive context for you. It doesn't have the emotional residue of the arguments you had with your spouse or the thousands of stressful Zoom calls. It's a clean slate for your brain.
So practically speaking, if we can't just buy a new house or move, does this mean we have to somehow scrub the place of its emotional memory?
If you can't leave, yes, you have to disrupt the context. We'll get to the architecture part in more detail later, but this is why people feel such a massive psychological shift just by rearranging the furniture in a room. It sounds so trivial, but it disrupts the visual pattern your brain is used to.
It signals to the brain, hey, you need to create a new file for this setup.
Exactly. If you move the desk so it faces the window instead of the blank wall, and you get a new lamp with a warmer light temperature, your visual cortex gets new input. It goes, oh, this is a new place. Okay, I don't have a file for this yet. What's the behavior here? You create a brief window of neuroplasticity where you can intentionally install a new habit.
That's wild. It makes you think. We think we need a whole new career, but sometimes we might just need to paint the walls and move the desk.
It's the lowest hanging fruit of behavioral change, but it's only the first pillar. The second one is even stickier, in my opinion. Routines.
Routines. The autopilot of life.
The structural skeleton of our day. The source argues that routines are how we outsource decision-making to save energy. If you had to consciously decide every single step of your morning, okay, do I brush my teeth now? Do I make coffee? How do I make coffee again? You'd be exhausted by 8 a.m.
It's decision fatigue.
Yeah.
So we build these little scripts to run on autopilot.
We build scripts, but here's the problem with scripts. Who wrote them?
The old me.
Exactly. If your routine was built by the version of you that was depressed or unhealthy or a chronic workaholic, then following that same routine every day keeps you locked into that state. Let's look at the classic unwinding routine after work.
Oh boy, this is a dangerous one. I think we all have one.
Let's say the old you dealt with a stressful day by coming home, throwing your keys in that specific bowl by the door, collapsing on the couch, ordering takeout, and then scrolling on your phone for 2 hours. That's a sequence. It's a chain reaction.
Key in bowl, but on couch, phone in hand. It happens without even thinking about it.
Now, the new you decides you want to eat healthy and read a book instead. But if you walk in the door at the same time, drop the keys in the same bowl, and sit on the same spot on the couch.
Yeah.
The groove is already worn into the record. The needle just drops right in. The physical action of sitting on that spot of the couch triggers the doom scroll behavior.
So you're saying the routine is physically encoded in the sequence of our actions, in a specific order.
Yes. And to change the end behavior, you often have to scramble the sequence. You have to break the chain at the very beginning. But the most insidious pillar of all, according to the source, and the one I think causes the most heartache, is the third one, people.
Yeah. This is the hard one. The source talks about relationships keeping old versions alive. And I want to be careful here because I don't want people to think we're just saying dump all your friends and family.
No, absolutely not. But we have to be really honest and look at the mechanics of social reinforcement.
It sounds almost malicious when you say it like that, keeping old versions alive.
Yeah.
Like they're actively trying to sabotage you. But it usually isn't malicious, is it?
No, it's rarely malicious. It's about consistency and comfort. Humans are pattern recognition machines. We like predictability in our social worlds. Your friends, your family, your colleagues, they have a mental model of who you are. They have a you avatar stored in their heads.
Right. Steve's the funny guy who always drinks too much at parties.
Yeah.
Or Sarah's the one who always says yes to extra work. You can count on her.
Exactly. And that avatar is predictable. It makes them feel safe. So if Steve suddenly stops drinking, or if Sarah suddenly starts setting boundaries and saying no, they're violating that mental model. They are breaking the script of the relationship.
And that creates a kind of dissonance for the group. It's uncomfortable.
It is. And subconsciously, the group will often try to pull you back. Not because they want you to fail, but because they want their world to make sense again. They want the Steve avatar to match the real Steve. So they might say things like, oh, come on, just one drink, don't be boring.
Or, why are you acting so weird lately? You used to be fun.
That's the one. I've heard that one. You used to be fun. And it stings because it feels like a rejection of who you are now. But when you unpack it, fun usually meant reckless or compliant or predictable.
Yeah, fun often means you didn't have any boundaries and I could get what I wanted from you.
Often, yes. That is the social pressure to remain consistent with who people think you are rather than who you are becoming. The source calls this the trap of the old version.
It reminds me of the whole crab bucket theory. One crab tries to climb out and the others pull it back down.
It is exactly that. If you are surrounded by people who only know and validate the version of you that you are actively trying to outgrow, you are swimming upstream in every single interaction. Every conversation is a subtle invitation to regress. It's like trying to quit smoking while living in a cigar lounge where everyone offers you a cigar the moment you walk in the door.
And they get genuinely offended if you don't take it.
What?
Are you too good for our cigars now?
Right. You think you're better than us now. It triggers their own insecurities about their own choices. So when you put it all together, you have this trinity. Places triggering our cortisol and our old memories, routines triggering our autopilot behaviors, and people triggering our old social roles. It's honestly a miracle anyone changes at all.
It really is.
Yeah.
When you stack it all up like that, just change your mindset approach seems so flimsy. It's like you're bringing a knife to a gunfight.
You're bringing a single positive thought to a full-blown chemical warfare zone.
So this leads us to a really interesting psychological concept the source brings up. Because logically, you'd think, if I'm unhappy, I'll leave.
Right.
If the environment hurts, if the friends are draining, if the job is toxic, we should want to get out. But so often, we don't. We stay. Why?
Because the devil you know is safer than the devil you don't. That's our evolutionary wiring in a nutshell. We are programmed to prioritize safety over happiness. And to the primitive part of our brain, the amygdala, safe, just means I can predict what happens next.
So even if what happens next is I get yelled at by my boss or I feel lonely and misunderstood in this relationship, at least I can predict it. There are no surprises.
Exactly. That is familiar discomfort. The source makes this huge distinction between familiar discomfort and healthy growth. And we, as humans, will almost always prefer a known bad environment to an unknown good one.
Because the unknown good one requires, well, it requires stepping into the unknown, the void.
Changing your environment, getting a new job, leaving a long-term relationship, moving to a new city, that is the great void. That is terrifying to the amygdala. It triggers a primal survival fear. So we rationalize staying in the toxicity because, well, at least I know the rules of this particular game.
It's the comfort zone, but comfort zone is actually miserable.
Yeah.
It's just familiar.
Yes. We should really call it the familiarity zone. There is absolutely nothing comfortable about it.
So the source argues that a huge part of growth is recognizing when we are choosing discomfort just because it's familiar. But here's the crux of the episode and the title of the source material itself. You can't heal in the same environment that hurt you. There is a tipping point.
There is, a critical one.
What's the signal? How do you know when it's not just a challenge to overcome? Because look, life is hard. We can't just quit every time something gets difficult, but a sign that you actually have to get out.
The signal, according to the source, is often when the soil itself has become toxic. And it suggests a really useful diagnostic question you can ask yourself. Is my environment responding to my attempts to change?
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's say you plant a seed and you water it. Does it grow? If you set a boundary at work, you say, I can't take calls after 7 p.m. anymore, and your boss respects it and things genuinely improve, then the environment is responsive. You can probably stay, you can heal there, the soil is workable.
That's a healthy challenge. You're growing, and the system is adapting with you.
But if you set that same boundary, and the environment punishes you for it, if the immune system of the office attacks you, mocks you, or marginalizes you for trying to change the status quo, then the soil is toxic. No matter what seed you plant in that soil, it will rot.
I really like that framing. It stops being about I'm quitting or I'm weak, and it starts being about I need better soil for this particular plant.
It's an agricultural decision, not a moral failure. You aren't quitting the marathon. You are realizing you've been trying to run it underwater. And humans, last I checked, are not amphibious.
So let's assume someone listening is nodding along right now. They're like, okay, yep, I'm running underwater. I've tried setting the boundaries. They aren't working. I need to change the context. The source brings up a really important strategic debate here. Distance versus boundaries.
This is a critical distinction because we love the buzzword boundaries right now. It's very trendy. We think, oh, I'll just set a boundary. But the source argues that sometimes boundaries are not enough. Sometimes healing requires distance, actual physical removal.
So why isn't a boundary enough in these really toxic cases?
Because maintaining a boundary has a metabolic cost.
A metabolic cost? What do you mean?
Think about it. A boundary is a wall you have to build, and then you have to actively defend it. If you are in a toxic workplace, you can set a boundary. You can say, I won't let my boss's negativity affect me. But if the environment is constantly attacking that wall, you have to stand guard. You have to actively defend that boundary every single hour of the day.
You're constantly on high alert. You're bracing for impact.
Exactly. That takes energy. Massive amounts of mental and emotional glucose. The source argues that if the environment is fundamentally hostile, the sheer amount of energy required to maintain the boundary leaves you with zero energy for actual growth.
So you're just surviving, not healing. You're just treading water.
You're holding a door shut against a hurricane. Sure, you're successfully keeping the water out of the house, which is great, but you can't exactly renovate the kitchen while you're bracing your entire body weight against the door.
That is a perfect image. So distance is letting go of the door and walking away from the hurricane altogether.
Distance removes the need for defense. When you physically leave the job or the relationship or the city, you don't have to spend all your energy blocking the negativity. The negativity is just gone. And it creates a vacuum, a space.
And in that vacuum, you finally have the surplus energy to actually build something new, to renovate the kitchen.
Exactly. That's why the source says sometimes boundaries just aren't enough. If the soil is truly toxic, you can't just put a little fence around your plant. You have to move the plant to a different garden.
Now, I want to address a counter-argument that I know is popping up in listeners' heads right now. Is leaving? Is it just running away? Because we're all taught to stick it out. Quitters never win. Bloom where you were planted. If I leave a hard situation, am I just avoiding conflict? Am I being, a snowflake?
This is a huge mental hurdle for so many people. The grind set culture tells us that suffering is virtuous, that staying is a sign of strength. But the source addresses this by reframing the entire act. It isn't running away if your goal is creating a healthier context. It's an architectural decision for your life.
Architectural, there's that word again.
Think about it this way. If a building has severe structural damage and is about to collapse, is getting out of the building running away, or is it survival?
It's survival.
Obviously. And if you are trying to build a new life, a new version of yourself, you need a foundation that can actually hold it. Leaving a toxic situation isn't retreat. The source calls it strategic relocation. You are moving your resources, your time, your precious energy, your talent to a place where they can actually yield a positive return.
Strategic relocation.
Yeah.
I like that so much better. It sounds proactive. It sounds like a CEO making a smart business decision, not a victim fleeing in the night.
It is proactive. Staying in a place that consistently hurts you isn't grit. Sometimes it's just masochism dressed up as perseverance.
Okay, so we've established that environment is a huge factor, that the trinity of reinforcement, people, places, routines, keeps us stuck, and that sometimes we need actual distance. But let's get really practical now, because as we said at the beginning, most of us can't just vanish.
Right. the mortgage still needs to be paid.
So Section 5 is all about the architecture of healing. The source explicitly warns against burning your life down.
Yes. And thank goodness for that, because the impulse, when we finally realize our environment is the problem, is to just torch everything. That's it. I'm quitting my job today. I'm dumping my partner. I'm selling my house and moving to Bali.
Which, let's be honest, sounds incredibly tempting on a rainy Tuesday afternoon.
Laughs. So tempting, but usually disastrous. Because that is often a trauma response in itself. It's chaotic, it's reactive. Yeah. The source advocates for being an architect. Architecture is deliberate, it's planned, it involves careful structural changes, not massive explosions.
So what does this actually look like? What are these small, realistic ways the source mentions? Let's get granular for everyone listening.
It starts with what we can call micro-adjustments. You change the environment in tiny ways that disrupt the old you cues without wrecking your overall stability. Let's go back to the place pillar for a second.
Okay.
If you work from home and you feel stuck and miserable in your office, you don't have to move houses, but you can hijack the doorway effect we talked about earlier.
How do you do that in a single room?
You change the sensory input of the room. We talked about moving the desk, but also scent, sound, lighting. If your old self worked in dead silence under a harsh overhead fluorescent light,
then the new me should work with a nice warm lamp and maybe some lo-fi beats playing in the background.
Yes. It sounds so silly and simple, but you are building a new stage set for your brain. If you decide to light a specific scented candle every time you do deep work, your brain starts to associate that smell with focus, not with stress and dread. You are actively hacking the association machine in your brain.
I love that. You're using your senses to override the old emotional memory of the space.
Yeah.
What about routines? Routines feel harder because they are so deeply ingrained.
You have to shake up the order. If your morning routine is wake up, immediately check email on your phone, stress out, then drink coffee, and you want to change that, you have to physically alter the flow. Don't charge your phone in your bedroom. Put it in another room overnight.
That's a classic one.
Buy a different brand of coffee or a new mug. Drive a different route to work. The source talks about how even a small change like a new route forces you to be alert.
Right. You can't be on autopilot if you're navigating a new turn. It wakes up your prefrontal cortex.
You are creating micro distances from the old patterns. You're just inserting a little bit of static to interrupt the signal that's been running for years.
And then there's the people aspect. This feels like the hardest one to micro-adjust. You can't just rearrange your friends like they're furniture.
No, please do not try to move your friends around the room. But you can shift the dynamic. The source talks about shifting how you engage with them, not necessarily if you engage.
Okay, give me an example of that.
All right. Let's say you have a friend who is a complaint bond. You know, that friend where the entire foundation of the friendship is based on complaining about work or your exes.
We all have one.
Yeah.
Or maybe we are one.
Every time you hang out, you leave feeling drained and negative. Now, you don't have to have a dramatic breakup conversation with them, but you can change the context of the friendship. Maybe you stop going to happy hour with them, or you're kind of trapped in a booth with alcohol and misery.
You change the venue of the friendship itself.
You say, hey, let's go for a hike this weekend, or let's go see that new movie. You switch to an activity-based interaction instead of a conversation-based one. You change the script. Now, if they can't handle the new context, if they just complain for the entire hike, then you might need more distance. But often, just changing the activity breaks the old, tired script.
You're diluting the toxicity of the interaction.
Or you start diluting that social circle by adding new people. You don't have to cut everyone off, but you absolutely need to add new voices that reinforce the new you. If you want to be a runner, you have to start hanging out with runners. Their consensus reality is completely different.
Right. To them, getting up to run on a Saturday morning is normal. To your old drinking buddies, it's completely insane.
Exactly. You are consciously choosing which normal you want to subscribe to. That is the architecture of healing. You are deliberately designing a life that makes the new habits easier and the old habits harder. That is the ultimate goal.
It all comes down to friction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Increasing the friction for the bad stuff and decreasing the friction for the good stuff.
Yes. The source says, growth often requires changing more than just your mindset. It gives you permission to stop fighting the environment and start changing it.
That is such a profound relief. It really takes the pressure off your own shoulders. It means I don't have to be Superman. I don't have to have an iron will that never breaks. I just need to be smart enough to build a fortress that actually supports me instead of one I have to fight against.
We are distinct from our environment, yes, but we are not independent of it. We are permeable. We absorb our surroundings. And if you accept that fundamental truth, you stop trying to be a rock and you start trying to be a gardener.
Stop trying to be a rock, start trying to be a gardener. That's going on a sticky note on my monitor right now.
You focus on the quality of the soil, the amount of light, the water. You optimize the conditions for growth. And if the conditions are right, the growth happens almost naturally. You don't have to force a plant to grow. You just have to create the right conditions and let it.
That feels like a much more sustainable and much more compassionate way to live.
It is. It's the difference between forcing yourself to survive and allowing yourself to thrive.
Okay, let's wrap this up. We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with that feeling of frustration, of the mindset-only attempts, the whole software update on broken hardware problem.
We realize that our willpower is a finite resource, but our environment is a 247 influence. And we looked at that trinity of reinforcement, people, places, and routines, how the doorway effect and social pressure work together to trap us in the old version of ourselves.
We talked about familiar discomfort, why we stay in bad situations just because we know the layout. And we discussed that critical difference between boundaries, which are like walls we have to defend, and distance, which is like moving to a new neighborhood.
And finally, we landed on the architecture of healing, the powerful idea that we can make strategic, structural changes, those micro adjustments, to break the feedback loop without having to burn our lives to the ground.
So here's the question for you listening right now. And I want you to really think about this as you go about the rest of your day. I want you to look around you, look at your desk, look at your commute to work, look at the 5 people you spend the most time with.
And ask yourself this question honestly. Are these things built for who you were? Or are they built for who you are becoming?
Because if they're all built for the old you, the stressed you, the insecure you, the stuck you, how can you possibly expect the new you to survive there?
You can't heal a burn while your hand is still in the fire. Sometimes the wisest, strongest, and kindest thing you can do for yourself is just to move your hand.
Simple, but not easy. But now you have the blueprint. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you in the next one.
Take care, everyone. And maybe start by moving some furniture.
Thanks for spending this time with us on Coffee Break. If this conversation stayed with you, you can find more episodes here on the channel. Until next time, take care.